She had to know that she could trust herself to handle the amount of pain that was going to come up and rage, because there was rage as well as pain. And she had to know that I could handle both her pain and her rage. And so she fed it to me in very small doses.
Welcome to Vulnerability Muscle, the inspiring podcast challenging norms and helping you redefine vulnerability as a strength. I'm your host, Reggie D. Each episode of Vulnerability Muscle dives into a variety of topics such as mental health, social issues, and mindset shifts. We explore the power of vulnerability in fostering meaningful connections, healing, building resilience, and promoting personal growth. Sometimes these conversations are uncomfortable, but good workouts often are. So join us and flex that vulnerability muscle. Welcome to this episode of Vulnerability Muscle. I'm your host, Reggie D. And today I have with me Phyllis Leavitt. Phyllis has a master's degree in psychology and counseling from Antioch University. She co-directed the Parents United Sexual Abuse Treatment Program in Santa Fe, New Mexico for 2 years, and then went into private practice full-time. Phyllis has treated children, families, couples, and individual adults for 34 years and has worked extensively with abuse and dysfunctional family dynamics, their aftermath, and some of the most important elements for healing. She has 2 previous books, A Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire. Her latest book, America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis, published by Morgan James Publishing, explores the roots of divisiveness and violence in America from a psychological point of view, with the goal of bringing the best of what heals relationships and restores us to safety into a national conversation. Phyllis lives with her husband in New Mexico and is now focusing on writing and speaking. Phyllis, welcome to Vulnerability Muscle. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me here with you today.
I am so glad to have you here, and I love the background that you have in psychotherapy and the approach that you've taken and all the folks that you've helped. So I just want to first start by saying thank you, because I know that work is consuming, it is a lifelong journey, and I'm sure there are stories and people that you have held on to for a really long time and supported. And so thank you for the work that you've done.
Well, and thank you. And thank you for saying that. And also, I just want to say thank you to all the people that helped me along my way. So, it's really a gift that once you receive it, you want to keep giving.
Yes, I love that. And I too have had so many people help me along the way, and just so thankful for the both clinical folks and non-clinical folks who have been a
Right.
part of my healing journey. It is the community that just pours into us and makes us feel that we are whole. That is the journey of healing, is getting back to that wholeness. Bef-
Exactly.
Before we jump into just a discussion between us two, I like
Sure.
to start with a segment called What Comes to Mind. And so, 3 questions, and you let me know the first things you can think of. What comes to mind when you hear the word vulnerability?
Yeah. I mean, I feel teary just from talking to you so far, but I think vulnerability is actually the key to our salvation as a human race. Um, because it's really the capacity to just be real about our gifts and our offerings and our contribution, to be real about the places we've been hurt, to be real about the healing journeys we might have been on, and what we've learned. And also, one of the things that I've learned being a psychotherapist and being a client myself is that there's 2 kind of big aspects to vulnerability. And one of them is to just be able to like have your feelings and talk about your pain and, your imperfections and the places where you have regrets and what hurt you,
Mm.
from other people, whether it's individual people or societally or gender wise or whatever, but also to be able to be vulnerable about the ways that we've hurt other people,
Yes.
because it's just part of being human that we've been hurt and that we hurt others. And I know in my own life, and I've seen this as a therapist, that when people can just really own the whole thing, it gives us permission to just be human and to be
Yes.
fallible and also to be great, you know?
Yes. Yes. Oh, that is such a beautiful answer. Thank you for that, because I think one thing you said is to feel our emotions, to experience our emotions, and I think that one piece alone in vulnerability has been
Right.
suppressed by so many people. I did the first season of Vulnerability Muscle with all men of color, and a
Mm,
group of people who have suppressed emotions, who have been
right.
taught that that is the way to be a man and that is the way to show up, and it steals humanity. It
Absolutely.
steals our humanity. And so
Absolutely.
to be able to express those emotions, to be able to express the wrongdoings that happen to us and the things that we have done to others, that is
Right.
beautiful because we
And
are.
and I just want to add, like, I grew up that way too. I grew up not, feeling any permission to have my feelings or express them. And I felt like they were a flaw. I felt
Mm,
like it was something I had to hide then and that I should be ashamed of, and that I had to show the world that I was just put together and fine when I wasn't. And I think so many people suffer from that. And therapy is one place where you can open up and have the safety to do that. But just being with safe people who know how to be vulnerable gives us that permission
it
too.
does. It does. Oh, that's beautiful. Well, I'm already loving this container that we're building. So thank you for being you.
Thank
What do
you.
you do to center yourself when you're feeling stressed, chaotic, depressed?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of things. I love being in nature. My husband and I live up in the mountains. We have national forest around us, so we hike, we go camping. I love to have a garden. I have a million house plants that I, get and give love to every day. I also meditate and I journal, and I connect with people that are like-minded and that are loving. So those are some of the big things I do. I also like to cook sometimes.
Yeah. What's a go-to recipe for you?
Oh, I live in New Mexico, so I'm really into the Mexican food. I love it.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite recipes is something called taco soup, and it's just a big mixture of lots of things with a lot of red chili in it. It's really
Yes.
good.
That's so good. I love that. I love that. And lastly, what is one of your favorite childhood memories?
Mm. I think I really connected with nature when I was little, and I loved being at the ocean. We used to go to the ocean in the summertime for a week or two, and that was a very special and favorite place of mine. I just like to watch the waves, actually.
Mhm. That's good. Nature is a theme that keeps coming up I hear, and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's so beautiful. And I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, in the
Okay.
city, and there are places where within minutes I can get out into nature and beautiful parks and just escape the city, and I love it. But even right here in at home, I have two monitors right here, and there's trees and it's the forest.
Mm-hmm.
So I love
Beautiful.
being in nature as well. So I love that. What inspired you to pursue a path in psychotherapy? What was that inspiration like?
Yeah. And that's a perfect question for your show on vulnerability because I had some significant early childhood trauma that really colored my life in a very, very profound way. I had a lot of pain growing up that I just tried to hide and suppress. And when I was young, nobody talked about psychotherapy, nobody talked about childhood trauma, nobody talked about family dynamics, nobody talked about healing. You were just supposed to get a good education, get married, and have kids, and make
Mhm,
money. And that was pretty much
mhm,
it. So I had no language for what was happening inside of me. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s and I had three little children by that time, um, and in a pretty dysfunctional marriage, that I was starting to hear about people going to therapy, and I went to therapy, and it really changed my life. And I had no idea before that your childhood could really affect the whole rest of your life because
yeah,
nobody ever said that.
yeah,
And I just thought the problem is me. I didn't think the problem got to be in my family somewhere.
yeah,
Um, So that was life changing. After my very first session, I went to the library and took out books on psychology, and I ended up becoming a psychotherapist because remembering, I had forgotten what happened to me because it was so traumatic that I repressed it. Um, and I was beginning to have memories. I went to graduate school in psychology, and I was in a hypnotherapy class. And in my hypnotherapy class, the memories really started to come up like full force. So I became a psychotherapist, and it was a very, very gratifying
Yeah.
career for me.
When you say repressed, just can you distinguish that from being suppressing emotion or suppressing memories and things versus
Oh,
repressed? What is the difference between those two
oh.
for the audience?
Well, I'm not sure if I know the difference, but what I would say, what I'm talking about is I forgot. I
Hmm.
buried the memories. Not everybody does that, but I did.
Yeah.
And so I had like, I think when you bury memories, there's stuff that sort of leaks out around the edges. So for me, it was like intense fears. I was
Mm.
terribly afraid of the dark. I was terribly afraid of spiders. Um, I really did not like being alone. I had a lot of anxiety and I had
Mm.
really bad nightmares. So it was like coming up around the edges, like trying to get my attention. But of course, I didn't know what was trying to get my attention
Hmm.
until I began to actually remember.
Wow, wow. My understanding is suppression is a conscious thing that we do, right? That
Okay,
we
okay.
consciously like there's an experience, there's something that we know is we don't want to feel, we don't want to remember, we don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
and we put that in a box. Whereas repression happens to a lot of us where it's unconscious and we don't make that choice, and it's our brain's way of protecting us from some of those scary things that it doesn't want to open up. And so just I think understanding that and giving ourselves grace for things that may have affected us from our past, that we can that is there, we can uncover it through a lot. You said hypnotherapy. Is it hypnotherapy you said in that
It was
class?
hypnotherapy that I did in a class, and then I did it privately, as a client.
What does that look like? Because I don't think I've ever done that.
Well, what I did was not like, somebody waving, a pendulum
Hmm.
in front of you and you go into a trance. It wasn't anything like that. I was fully conscious. It was more like guided visualization back into the past.
Mm.
And there was the techniques for doing that, and the kind of it's guided imagery of like, going down in a safe place, and um, asking your psyche to take you where you need to go to heal, and your psyche follows. And but I did want to say one thing about the distinction you made between repression and suppression, because I did both. I
Mhm.
repressed the memories and I suppressed as much as I possibly could the feelings, but
Mm.
not successfully.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But I think that's a really good distinction that you made, because I think a lot of people don't really have words for what they're
Mm.
doing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Uh, that is like so. Were you when you were uncovering things in that class and uncovering it? What did you learn about yourself? Are there lessons that you took away, or things that you saw that were in your family that you're like, oh, this is making so much sense now?
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the things that I saw about myself were that, the big takeaway, and I think, more people know this today than I did then, but the big takeaway was something happened to me. I'm not a flawed person. Something happened to me that caused me to feel the way I do about myself, the way I do about other people, and the reactions and coping mechanisms that I have. And if that was all I got out of it, that would have been like amazing,
Yeah.
because we tend to blame ourselves for the things that have happened to us that are painful. We feel like we deserved it, or there was something we did to cause it, or we were just born flawed, or whatever we take on about ourselves. So to get that understanding that something actually happened to me, and I'll give you this illustration. When I very first began going to therapy, then as I was having these memories and working with someone on what I was uncovering, when I would contact that like inner child in myself, I hated her. I
Mm.
just thought she was horrible and ugly and flawed. And the more and that's what I carried around, repressed and suppressed inside of myself. So, of course, that was changing the way I behaved and reacted in my life. And the more I got in touch with what happened, and that was just an innocent, pure little girl inside of me who did nothing to deserve
Mhm.
what happened to her, that whole veil of self hatred began to lift. And
Mm.
that in itself is incredible gift.
It is. Oh, it's priceless. It's so priceless to have the compassion for that inner child in you, the
Right,
inner child
right.
that's in all of us that did nothing, that didn't
Did
deserve
nothing.
it, that
Right,
isn't flawed, or isn't bad in any kind of way.
right.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Were there patterns that or that you saw in your family that you wanted to break, that you wanted to end some of that caused those feelings in you?
Yeah, I think the pattern was, well, first of all, nobody talked about anything real.
Mm,
My family was, and I want to say with compassion, looking back on my family, my parents were born from first generation immigrants of people who had fled, poverty and discrimination and oppression from Eastern Europe. So they brought their own legacy of unhealed trauma with them, and especially my mother, I think, did. And I think it was completely unconscious for her. So the ways that she acted out, in hindsight, I don't believe she had any real control over, as devastating as they were to me.
mhm.
Um, but I can see that, and so, I think there was just a commitment really early on in life, maybe even before I had words for it, that I was going to break that cycle
Yeah.
and find healing, and be able to speak truth and be able to. And I'll tell you, when I first began to express my feelings, it was so scary.
Yeah.
It was so scary, and I felt so vulnerable. Um, but I think it's the doorway to freedom. I
Mm,
really do.
yeah, it is terrifying. Like, healing in itself is scary because
Right,
you're uncovering stuff and you are feeling stuff that you don't wanna feel, but I
right.
think you have to feel those feelings in order to heal,
That's
and
right.
like, it's the pathway to so much discovery and so much freedom and liberation. I think
Absolutely.
it's such a healing thing. What can you share about your experience with Parents United and your work around
Mm.
sexual abuse treatment?
It was really profound for me, and I feel like it was a gift from the universe that I ended up there. When I was in graduate school getting my master's degree in psychology and counseling, I had to do an internship. And at that time, Parents United existed. I don't know if that program still exists, but at that time, there was a Parents United program where I lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I actually started there as an intern in that program. And I think I was guided because, my issue was sexual abuse. And I learned so much from, it was a wonderful program. It was a group therapy program. We worked with children of all ages who had been molested. We worked with what we called the non-offending parents, which was like the parent of a child who'd been molested by somebody in the family or by somebody close, but they weren't the offender.
Mm,
And we also worked with offenders. And then we also worked with adult survivors of sexual abuse.
mhm.
And so, I read tons of books. I had so much firsthand experience. And it actually helped me in my own healing journey to work with other people and hear their stories and really know that I wasn't alone. I mean,
Yeah.
because I think that's one of the terrible legacies of any kind of abuse or neglect is that you feel really, really alone and separate from the whole world. And you're not,
Yeah.
you know.
You're not, yeah. That you're not unique in not a negative way, right? Like,
Right,
you're
right,
unique in your experiences and what you actually experienced, and no other story is exactly like
right,
yours, but you're not alone in what you have in what you may feel after that, or the types of trauma that we experience, and
right.
having that community of sorts, And that feeling of I'm not alone is healing in itself. I
It
think
is.
for a really long time, I had this fear of abandonment, or this feel like just
Right.
feelings like I am not enough. I am worthless. And if my parents can't love me, then who can love me? Like I'm
Right.
unlovable. And you
Totally.
go through a world and you think like I'm the only one whose family feels this way about them. But when you get out and you meet people and you speak to people and you're in healing circles, you realize that other people have similar stories. Other people may have that story and will never disclose it or never talk about it, but
Right.
some people will, and we connect and bond and resonate over those shared experiences, and then build our own families of love, the
Right.
chosen family.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I really resonate with what you're saying because that's exactly how it was for me. Um, to realize not only was I not alone because there's millions of people like us, like
Hmm.
me, because unfortunately abuse and neglect are very rampant in our society, much
Yeah.
more than I think the average person knows.
Yeah.
But also because to learn that, oh, my symptoms were the normal outcome of what happened to me. I'm not a
Right.
flawed person. It's sort of like if you cut yourself, you're going to bleed. That's
Yeah.
normal. If
Right.
you cut your heart, you're going to have a broken heart, or you're going to
Mm,
have symptoms of depression or anxiety, or as you said, feeling like you're unlovable or worthless. I had all those things. And I took them to be signs of who I was rather than symptoms of something terrible that happened.
yeah. Yeah. It is so it's more common than I think we even know today.
I do too.
I think trauma, I expect like complex trauma. I live with PTSD and complex trauma, and I look at the circumstances and environments that shape that for me, and I see so many other people who don't have the diagnosis because they
I
probably
know.
don't have the resource or hadn't
Right,
talked to anyone or disclosed their things, but it shows up in their
right,
behaviors, in
right.
their health, in their social, and all of that. And that is happening, and it's affecting a lot of our people.
I
And a big
agree.
part of that you mentioned is there's societal harm too.
Yes,
And I want to talk about your book. You talk about this
I
American
do.
therapy. What are you speaking to in that book, and what can people learn?
Well, it's a perfect segue because actually I was just about to bring it up from what you were saying because I talk about that. Like when we have both in our homes and in our immediate families or communities, when we have abuse and neglect going on that goes unnamed, that goes untreated, that is not stopped, we have a host of symptomatic people. And
Mhm.
we live in a society today that more or less just blames people for their symptoms.
Mm.
You're a loser. You don't amount. You don't try hard enough. You were born bad, or you're a sinner, or pull yourself up by your bootstraps. What's wrong with you that you just can't change your mind and change your behavior and do it better, whatever. We're very judgmental, we're
Yeah.
very condemning, and we believe in punishing people for their symptoms instead of helping them. And that's a big part of what I talk about. It's not all of what I talk about, but it's a big part because to the extent that as a nation, and I call it the family of America, because all groups of people operate on family dynamics. And that's one thing that I learned as a therapist. You go to you have people come in and they're talking about what's going on in their office or their job, and it's a reenactment of their family trauma. The person in charge doesn't appreciate them or doesn't ever give them a raise, and just has some kind of projection onto them that's negative, and so they can never succeed, and they react the way they did as a kid. And I'm not saying all bosses are like that, I'm just
Right.
giving one example. But they react as they did as a kid, and either they just try to please because that's how they learn to survive, or they hide, or they create a problem and speak out and create a disturbance in the office or attack people or quit or whatever they do. But we tend to repeat what we know if we haven't had a chance to heal. And that's happening in the family of America, that many people are are unhealed.
Mm-hmm.
And they're either getting into positions of power and acting out their unhealedness on masses of other people, which we're seeing, I think, quite a bit of in America today. And then you have people that identified with the aggressor as a way to survive. And so they support the bully on the playground and they want to be liked by the bully on the playground. And they may become complicit in acts of violence or discrimination or in some other way being hurtful to other people and othering other people.
Mm-hmm.
You're the problem rather than what can I take responsibility for and actually help change here. Or you have people who are so afraid because they've learned to be helpless and passive as a way to survive whatever happened to them, that they can't protect themselves, they can't stand up for themselves or their families or their children, but not because they're flawed human beings. I mean, I've seen it all. I've seen, parents who could not protect their children from an abusive partner because they were so disabled in their own psyches,
Mm.
not because they didn't even want to necessarily. I've seen people who are abusers. I've seen people who are complicit in the abuse. It's all a symptom of unhealed family trauma, all
Wow.
of it. And so one of the big messages that I say in my book is that inside the perpetrator is an unhealed victim, and we don't know
Mm.
that. And we
Can you
just,
say that again? Because I think that's so powerful.
yeah, inside the perpetrator is an unhealed victim.
Mm.
And one of the things that I, did some research as I wrote my book to, give examples both from case histories of people that I've worked with and myself, but also from things in the news and things that have happened in our society that, aren't my personal experience, but they're general knowledge. And one of the things that I looked at a little bit was our prison system, which is
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I discovered was that statistically, we know that more than 50% of incarcerated Americans are unhealed victims of childhood
Oh, yeah.
trauma.
Yeah.
And and we need as a society to commit to rehab, to
Yes.
to saving people, to helping people heal, for their own sake and for the sake of society, um,
Absolutely.
and for the sake of their children.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You bring up a really good point and something that is heavy on my heart right now. And has been a issue that I've spoken about and talked about. I have family members that have been in prison. My father spent time in prison. I have an uncle in prison right now, and my uncle called me yesterday and he told me, he's like, nephew, man, they're not treating us right in here, and
no,
this place that I'm at is probably been the worst for my mental health in all the time that I've ever spent in prison,
I'm
and
sure.
I haven't been outside in 8 months. He has
Oh
not
my
had
God.
fresh air. He hasn't heard a bird chirp. He hasn't seen a tree outside in 8 months. And it just breaks my heart that we put people in places and claim to be rehabilitating them when we're only causing them more harm.
Absolutely.
It's inhumane.
It's
It's
inhumane
absolutely inhumane.
and it's counterproductive.
Yeah.
And that's what I think, we really don't get. Like, if you don't help people, they're going to keep being on symptomatic.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and then we have more and more symptomatic people in our society. But we're a society, and this is where, I make a lot of comparison between an abusive family and an abusive society. The
Mhm.
microcosm and the macrocosm are the same.
Yes.
And in an abusive family, for the most part, the abuser blames the victim for what they did to them.
Mhm.
I hit you because you did blah, blah. I
Yes.
molested you because you asked for it, because you wore that short skirt, because blah, blah. And they really let themselves believe that their victim deserved what they did to them
Mm.
instead of realizing that they're abusive and
Yeah.
their abuse came from somewhere and there's something to heal in themselves.
Yes.
And that's one of the big things that I just want to make common knowledge, that
Yes.
we behave towards so many people like they deserve what we did to them, like prison, like that kind of a prison system. They don't deserve that. They
No.
need help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are people that we don't know how to treat. It's
Right.
absolutely true. And there are people who have committed such heinous crimes that we probably, for where we are in our societal development, probably need to be safe from them
Mm-hmm.
because we don't know how to rehabilitate them. But even so,
Yeah.
even somebody who's in prison for murder can be treated as a human being.
Yes, yes. Oh, you are speaking my language. This is something like when you understand humans, like you said, like when you get a cut, you bleed. When you experience heartache, when or heartbreak, when you experience trauma, it manifests in behavior and in
Right,
symptoms that we have demonized and criminalized instead of helping and supporting. And we put
right,
that behind bars and we further perpetuate that harm.
100%.
And I think like so your book and the what you're speaking on reminds me of so much of the thought process that I had as I was writing my own book that
Oh,
it released in 2021. So it's been some years now, but I there was this process where from normalization to realization to liberation. And
mm,
normalization was looking at the state of the world as it was, the state of my own personal mental health as it was,
right.
and how we normalize things that are very unhealthy. But because of that, it's kind of like the myth of normal by Gabor
Mhm.
Mate. It's
Mhm.
we normalize things that are very unhealthy, and because we
Right.
grow to accept them, it just becomes the norm, and it just happens.
Exactly.
And I had to reflect and see those things in my life, things that I accepted that were unhealthy and harmful for myself and for others, that were done to me and that I was doing to other people. That was that period of realization for me where I was outside of the environment. I was in a clearer space. I was in a safer space. I wasn't in that survival mode where I'm realizing all of these different things are very harmful. But the ultimate shift to liberation was saying that I have to do something about that. Right? I can't just sit there and say, "Oh, that's messed up," and not
Right.
go heal the wounds that are inside of me,
Right.
and how that same journey for us individually and how you say for the family unit and dynamic, that is the same thing that is paralleled with our society. We've
That's right.
normalized things. We had years and years, whether it be civil rights, whether it be women's rights, whether it be these big events and periods of time where we have realization that things are messed up,
Right.
and then it's like, what do we do? What are we going to do about it? So
Right.
what are some of your feedback or strategies around how we help our families and our country heal?
Well, a couple things that came up. My mind races when you're talking because I have so many associations with what you're saying. But one of the words that I just really want to emphasize is safety.
Mhm.
You said when you were safe,
Yeah.
you could do that work.
Yep.
And that is critical. People stay on survival and do the best they can with whatever they have if they're not safe.
Mhm.
And they tend to repeat what they know that they learned, even if it's highly dysfunctional, to
Yeah.
do that. So providing safety for one another is a key to healing.
Mhm.
And for me, the big stroke around that is a commitment to nonviolence,
Mm.
whether it's in our home, in our community, in our places of business, in schools, in churches, and in a country. And
Yes.
without a commitment to nonviolence, we are going to have more of the same.
Yep. It's
Because
and
when
it's so hard to even imagine nonviolence when our country goes to war. It
I
was
know,
founded with war, and again,
right,
normalized. We have normalized that behavior, and so from a macro level to the micro, you're going and killing and bombing and shooting. And so when I'm in my neighborhood and I see
right,
killings, and that feels normal, it feels like how things are supposed to be. So I
right.
love that. I love that we need to practice nonviolence. Oh my god.
Yeah, I really think it's the bottom line. And of course, it's not popular. And
Yeah.
it's also not profitable,
Hmm.
which is a big issue. One of the other things I wanted to highlight that I talk about so many psychological principles in my book because I really think they're not common knowledge. So when a child is in a dysfunctional home, let's say they're being hit or they're being molested or there's just a lot of screaming and yelling or their parents are suffering from addiction and they're not really available to take good care of their children or whatever the child is suffering from, they're going to be symptomatic. right? And for the child who withdraws probably isn't going to get as much attention as the one who starts beating up on their siblings or hitting kids at school or setting fire to their house, right?
Right.
But in the world of psychology, we know that those symptoms are a cry for help. That's
Yes.
the child's way of saying, help me, I'm in trouble, I'm hurting, I need rescue. And we know that. And so, when a child comes to therapy because they set fire to the bedroom, we look at the family dynamic right away. No child is born an arsonist, for instance, or no child is born just wanting to beat up somebody. They
Mm-hmm.
learn this somewhere.
Yeah.
So that principle needs to be applied on a societal level. Our most symptomatic people, the young person who walks into an elementary school and shoots up a first grade classroom, horrible as what they did is crying for help for
Mm-hmm.
enormous family and societal issues.
Yeah.
And I want us to listen to that cry for help. I
Mm,
want us to listen as a society and really try to answer that cry for help instead of just saying, oh my God, what, that's just a horrible person and they deserve to die.
right.
You know,
Right.
it does us no good. And, the research shows what we've done so far, that people who commit these mass murders are in enormous rage and pain.
Yes.
Doesn't justify what they did. Of
Right.
course it doesn't. But does it wake us up?
Yes.
I say, if a car engine blows, we commit all kinds of money and man hours and expertise to fix that engine so it doesn't blow up. When the
Mm-hmm.
person blows, when the person blows, we lock them up and throw away the key
Yep.
and judge them instead of like, what created this? What created this in their home? What support maybe their family needed that they weren't getting? Maybe their parents can't make a living wage and they're never there. Maybe their own pain has caused them to be addicts. Who
Mm-hmm.
knows?
Yeah.
That's what I think we need to commit to is people and
Definitely.
healing the family on every single level.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I yet just yesterday I gave a keynote for an organization called Healing Housing in Nashville,
Mm,
and they're providing housing and wraparound services for women who are recovering from addiction.
mm,
And I heard a testimony from one of the women who had graduated from the program, and she said that she had been in multiple programs prior to this, and that they would always treat her substance abuse without treating her past trauma.
right.
And for me, and because how I got introduced to it all, that is intertwined. Of course, it's intertwined,
Sure.
but apparently that has not always been the case. And how we treat folks, and to not recognize those two as playing a role, as the trauma playing a role into the substance use, is it just blows my mind. And how many areas of our lives and of the things that we call harm and demonize in the world are related to past trauma. It's
Totally. Countless. And
countless.
I worked for a little while part time in a substance abuse treatment program in Santa Fe, and that was actually the model. And I think it is a lot the model for a lot of treatment centers, and it's called dual diagnosis. So they treat
Mm.
the substance and they treat the trauma, and they know that they go together.
Mhm.
And I don't think there was one person I ever worked with there that didn't have massive trauma.
Yeah,
Right.
seriously, seriously. With all the people that you've worked with over your years, of course, without breaching confidentiality, can
Sure.
you share a story of maybe where their vulnerability helped and was a strength and helped them get the help that they actually needed or help them recover from whatever they were dealing with?
Yeah, I think of a client of mine who probably had the worst abuse story that I ever heard. But when I first met her, she had brought her child in for therapy. So she was not my client. And she was tough as nails. Her
Mhm.
defense system was like armor. And you could even see it in the way she sat and the way she talked and the way she looked at me. It was all very on the offense. maybe offense and defense combined
Yeah.
to a wall of invulnerability. And it became really clear to me that her child's symptoms were actually a result of that in her mom. So anyway, I did a little bit of work with the child, and then that family kind of went away. And a year later, the mom called me, and to work herself. And slowly, I mean, very slowly, that wall of defense came down. And she allowed, and I'm telling you, little by very little, her vulnerability and her pain and her trauma to come through. And it was very slow. And I really want to emphasize this because she had to know that she could trust me.
Yes.
As well as herself. She had to know that she could trust herself to handle the amount of pain that was going to come up, and rage, because there was rage as well as pain. And she had to know that I could handle both her pain and her rage. And so she fed it to me in very small doses.
Yeah.
And we worked together for a really long time, and she transformed her life. And I really mean that. She transformed her life. And she transformed her relationship with her child, and she transformed her relationship with herself.
Yeah.
And so that's a really poignant one, because really what she described as having happened to her would be something you'd think you'd see in a movie, and it wouldn't be really true. It was that pervasive and that ongoing and that horrible.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you for the help that you've given her and the world. Because as you mentioned, like in your book, it starts at a micro level, it affects the macro and vice
Right.
versa. And
Right.
you reminded me of something that I think is just, I want to extend thanks to you. I want to say it's an honor to receive the trust that you've already, like, you've opened up and you shared things that are vulnerable, especially from a perspective of a therapist, because I know there's a certain boundary that you have to set because you may have a potential client or a client listening to this. And so I the trust in this platform, the trust in me to share, and to the listeners and all the past guests, like, while it's on my mind, like, there, some of these conversations are very difficult for the
Mm-hmm.
guests to share, for the listeners to listen to, and to trust that we will provide an experience that is getting into that pain of what the experience was, but finding some hope and healing on the other side of that. So
Right.
if you're listening to this, thank you for trusting in vulnerability muscle and trusting in me and helping guide that experience. So yeah, I appreciate that. That was beautiful.
Well, I appreciate you because, immediately I can feel all the work you've done, to be in the world of your own vulnerability and be in that world with other people. And so, and it just really spreads like a ripple effect,
Yeah.
one person. And I really had that gift from other people who, when somebody would say something vulnerable when I was much younger, it was like, oh my God, how did they have the courage to share that? And then that gave me courage.
Hmm.
So, yeah. And I think, again, I can't say it enough. I think that's where healing lies. I think that's where, and the more healing we each do, that really is the source of what's going to heal our society.
Yeah.
Because you can't heal a society with unhealed people. You
Right.
can't.
Right. Right. What do you say to those people who don't feel that there is anything wrong with our society for whatever reason?
Well, I think that what I just keep sharing, what I've learned, and I try to share that in the most non-judgmental and non-blaming way, because I think people can hear something when they don't feel like they're being judged or they're being blamed or being made wrong for their attitude. So I had a recent experience where someone kind of criticized something that I said,
Mhm.
and I felt fine about what I said. I
Mhm.
mean, if there was something to look at that I felt like I had done wrong, I was certainly willing to do that. But I could tell from this person's response that they were reacting out of their own, projection onto me or their own unhealed place, whatever it was. And so I just replied in a way of deep understanding, as much as I could muster, for where they were coming from. And then I simply said why I said what I said, without attack, without blame, without making that person wrong. And it was miraculous. I
Yeah.
mean, it really was miraculous. They totally dropped where they were coming from and appreciated what I said. Now, that doesn't always happen.
No.
And I think you have to be ready for that. Like sometimes people aren't going to hear you. And then we're responsible for how we react to that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, if I
What
just attack
boundaries do you
back, what
put?
am I? Who am I? Go
Yeah.
ahead.
What boundaries do you put in place in that scenario? Like you notice and you feel that there is a wall, it's not getting through. You shared all the insights, all the research, all the stories that you could share, and it's just not getting through. When do you decide that, okay, I need to preserve my energy and my peace?
Yeah, well, I don't, in my personal life, because I'm so devoted to, like, I'm on a lot of podcasts. I really want to spread my message. I really want to promote my book. And I talk about my book, and I've done some in person talks about my book as well. And I want to continue writing. So I'm not face to face with a lot of opposition,
Mhm.
although I have certainly met it. And there's people in my family, in my extended family, who don't believe the way I do, who are more on the side of blame and, sort of like what I consider the old paradigm of
Yeah.
human relations. And with some of those people, you know what? I've just decided not to talk about it. I
Mm,
love them. I love them. And the relationship is more important to me than convincing them of my point of view.
mm,
And I feel like there's a place for that. Like,
mhm.
they're also good people. They're
Yeah.
good people. They do
Right.
good things in their life and they don't see the world the way I do. And that has to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to recognize that people are complex and that I could have a flawed perspective about something and that's subjective, but I can
Right.
still be a good person and vice
Right.
versa, like the same for them and me and and so I think that is very crucial and important. That's nice. I want to ask just you spoke about how you got into work with families and things because you recognize that pain in your past. What would be some of your advice to someone who may have experienced a similar trauma to you? You can name it or not name it, but somebody who's out there that don't name it. Somebody is out there that has felt what you felt. What is your advice to that person right here to uplift them and make them feel like there is a better tomorrow?
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the things that I'll repeat something that I said before and then add to that. It's not your fault. Whatever happened to you is not your fault. And even sometimes, I had a little boy that I worked with so long ago who had been molested when he was 4 years old.
Mm,
And when he was sitting in the office with me, he said, You know, I liked it. It felt good.
mm,
And you can imagine what he would have taken away from that, right? Because his body was stimulated and it felt good. And so, yeah. Oh, you want to
I
talk?
was I was 4 years old in the same
Yeah.
scenario.
Wow. Wow. And
And
so
I
you
and the
go ahead.
first time that I disclosed that, I didn't associate it with trauma. It was
Mhm.
because it was a girl, and it was
Mm.
as a boy, it's like this pride thing. It's like
Mhm.
you wear this stamp on your chest, and you walk around with your, big and bad, and look what I did, but I was
Right.
4.
Right.
And
Right.
what that does and shapes your brain to think and see, and it is definite trauma.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I remember
Absolutely.
saying the exact same thing, was like, I actually liked the feeling of it. It was like, yeah, naturally it's stimulating, but
Right.
it is trauma.
It is absolute trauma and it's violation and it's exploitation by the person who did it, who was probably unconsciously acting out their own trauma that hasn't been healed. Nevertheless, that was a 4-year-old child, and the person who did that to him was an adult. And And so it's really important for us to know that the really harmful things that other people have done to us are not our fault. We didn't deserve it. And we deserve help to heal the symptoms that have been left in us and the negative beliefs that have been left in us, and sometimes the dysfunctional behaviors that we've adopted as a result. But even more than that, or I don't want to say but, I want to say and, even more than that, it's really important to know, because I think our society also does not reflect this back, and a lot of people don't know even how to reflect this back to one another, that inside every one of us is an absolutely essential, beautiful, pure, innocent human being. And
Yes.
the best therapy sees that in a person and they speak to that. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Brian Stevenson. Have you ever heard of him?
Yes.
One of the things that he said that I quote so often that I love is, he said, "You are not the worst thing that ever happened to you or the worst thing that you ever did. There's an essential being underneath all the layers of hurt that we've experienced." And I think real healing comes when another human being sees that in you and feeds that in you and believes in that in you.
Yes. Wow. Wow.
Have you
Wow. Wow. That's
have
so
you
beautiful.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's beautiful. You can go ahead. Keep going.
I just think of all these wonderful things. I just wanted to quote one more thing. Have you ever heard of Father Boyle, Greg Boyle?
No.
Oh, you have to read his books.
Okay.
He's a priest in LA, and he started this big organization called Homeboy Industries. And it's a service program for people coming out of gangs, and many of whom have come out of prison. And of course, many of whom have had massive childhood trauma underneath all that. And he said that it would be really, he wrote these two incredible books. One is called Tattoos on the Heart, and the other one is called Barking to the Choir. And you will laugh and you will cry
Yeah.
reading these books. But one of the things that he said is, because he worked with a lot of people who came out of prison, and he said, "We imagine," this makes me cry when I say it. He said, "We imagine a world without prisons, and then we build that world."
Yes. Oh, I love that.
Me too.
I absolutely love that. Wow. That reminds me of just concept, that the visualization of that. And like, I'm studying positive psychology now, and it's helping in one, I'm helping coach people in that, but
Mm,
seeing the world that they want, the life that they want to live, and building that life
that's right.
through the patterns, through the habits, through the daily activities. And so that is, oh man, that's big. I love that. Ooh, ooh. I want you threw some quotes out there, and there's a quote that I shared yesterday at the lunch that I want to read, and
Mm.
it's from Bell Hooks, and it's about love. And it says, "There can be no love without justice.
I love
Abuse
that.
and neglect negate love. Care and affirmation, the opposite of abuse and humiliation, are the foundation of love. It is a testimony to the failure of a loving practice that abuse happened in the first place."
Right.
And it's love is not simply a feeling, but a deliberate choice and a conscious action. It requires intention and effort to nurture and sustain. I think that when we can create that justice, because there's been harm, and
Oh,
there's been harm
absolutely.
because there hasn't been a loving practice, there hasn't been this treatment toward trauma where we lead with compassion and care and understanding and grace for people's humanity. When we
Right.
can build that and are intentional about that, we make this world, and like your book, this country, a better place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that is a really beautiful quote, and it's a really good representation of the connection. That would be my truth. I really
Mhm.
believe that. That's in a way, that's the heart of what my whole book is about. And one of the things that I would add to that is that, to the extent that we can heal our own wounds, we become those loving people.
Yes.
And I've
Yes.
never seen that not happen.
Yes. I love that. Oh. All right. I want to get into a segment called Fill in the Blank, but you got me so lifted. Like, I feel like I'm going to rise up out of my chair and like, it's just, I feel so good right now. But this is Fill in the Blank. Vulnerability makes me feel blank.
Well, when I was young, it made me feel really scared.
Mhm.
Now it makes me feel whole. It makes me feel real. It makes me feel like I can be my full self.
Yes. I like to say that vulnerability is the ultimate act of self love because when we can drop the shame, the stories that we tell about ourselves and that we feel that aren't true to who we are in our hearts,
Right,
that is the act of self love. I can show you all of me because I love all of me. I'm not hiding
right,
any of that. So
right,
I love
right.
that. My biggest strength is blank.
I think my biggest strength is my voice, like actually having the courage to have my voice,
Yes.
whether it's in speaking with someone or I've done a lot of writing. I wrote 2 books before America in Therapy, and they're really about my own healing journey. So yeah, I think that is, um, I kind of came into this world knowing at a pretty young age that I wanted to be a writer. How you know that? I don't know, but
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Um, I need help with blank.
you know, I still need help with a certain level of self-criticism. I think that
Mhm.
I always deal with that. And I feel like I deal with it deliberately now, whereas it used to just sort of run my life. But it's still there. Like,
Mhm.
you're not doing enough. You're not reaching enough people. You haven't made a great enough impact. You should blah 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 blah. So I think that's one thing that
Yeah.
I still deal with.
How can I or the world or someone help you or hold you accountable to that?
I think that people, well, I'll give my husband as an example. I think he does in a really loving way because he doesn't buy into my self-criticism at
Mhm.
all, and I think we need those people around us that don't buy into our naysayer voices.
Mhm.
And he always reflects back, what I am doing,
Mhm.
and my commitment to what I'm doing. So I think we need that.
I love that. I love that. And lastly, when I need inspiration, I turn to blank.
I think I would have to say that I turn to myself. That's when I really journal and I listen to
Mm.
my highest guidance and I get the best inspiration and meditation also.
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful. You have blessed me and this audience with so much goodness, and I'm so thankful. Are there any final thoughts, any things that you wish I had asked, or things you want to get off your chest before we close out?
I can't think of anything that I wish you asked. You're a wonderful podcast host because you come from a grounded experience in what we're talking about. It's not just theoretical or kind of a rote set of questions. It's like I'm talking to you as a real person who knows what I'm talking about and has your own contribution to make to the conversation. And so I really, really appreciate that. I have a whole book of things that I didn't say. But yeah, no, I think we got to say quite a bit, and I really, really, uh, really appreciate you and the hard work you've done in your life to be where you are and contributing the way that you are.
Thank you so much. Phyllis, how can people find you? How can they get the book, get previous books? How can they reach you? All of those things.
Yeah. I mean, the easiest place is just to go to where you buy books, Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any of the big booksellers. If you just Google my name, my 3 books will come up. They're A Light in the Darkness, Into the Fire, and America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing. So you can find the books anywhere. I would love for people to visit my website. I have lots of recordings on my website of talks I've done. I have lots and lots of blogs that I've written, and other information about how you can just contact me if anybody has questions. You can just write to me or and I love to converse with people about whatever comes up for them.
Yeah.
Um, I'm on all the social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and I have some articles on Substack and YouTube and all that.
Oh, you're
But
doing it all. Let's go.
yeah, well, there's a lot to be done, right?
Definitely, definitely. Phyllis, I love that. And I love what you gave our audience today. It's about healing ourselves. And when we heal ourselves, we heal our country. And it's reflecting, going back, looking at those stories, looking at those family dynamics that have impacted the ways that we show up in the world. How can we heal? How can we break some of those unhealthy patterns and ultimately create a better and healthier, more just society for all
Right,
people?
right.
So Phyllis, this has been wonderful. With all the things that you could be doing and all the places you could be, I appreciate you being here with me, embracing vulnerability.
Well, absolutely ditto.
Thank you for joining us in another episode of Vulnerability Muscle. If you've enjoyed these conversations around vulnerability, please consider leaving a review. Your feedback not only motivates us to continue to do the work that we do, but it allows other people to witness the power of vulnerability. Share your thoughts on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you're listening from. And don't forget to spread the word. You can follow us at Vulnerability Muscle on Instagram and me personally at Reggie D Ford across all platforms. Visit vulnerabilitymuscle.com for additional resources and support. And remember, embracing vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. It is the source of your greatest strength. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but most workouts are. So keep flexing that vulnerability muscle.